Hello beautiful people, my name is Varstahl, and today we're looking at the PC port of Monster Hunter World. Let's get on board, shall we? Before we begin, a note of warning for Nvidia graphics users. There seems to be a problem with the latest drivers provided by Nvidia that happen to tank the performance of this game. So if you experience problems like low FPS, you might want to revert to driver version 398.36. The interface section provides the means to resize heads-up display and subtitles that can be adapted to your own preferences. Among the display options, we have the usual suspect plus a frame limiter and the advanced graphics settings, but we'll get a deeper look in just a moment. In the audio section you can customize manually the individual levels for voice, background music and sound effects, but there is no master slider. We can also find a few options for sound modeling, like the customizable dynamic range. This option allows the user to reduce or amplify the difference in levels between the quietest sound and the loudest. So, for example, you can have a very flat sound where nothing is too quiet or too loud, or you can go to the other extreme, where quieter sounds are very quiet and louder sounds are booming. It's a nice feature to have. This game also has an integrated voice chat for online gameplay. As for the localizations, you can find several options for all the text in interface and game subtitles, but most importantly, several voice tracks. If you never played Monster Hunter before, I highly suggest you enable the Monster Hunter language. And I'll just leave it at that. Key configuration allows full remap of keyboard and mouse. Extended mouse buttons are also supported. And if you remap any key, you will find that in-game the key prompts are correctly reflected. Back to display options. Brightness configuration, quite necessary to experience the game properly. The standard window of borderless window and full screen options. You can configure the frame limiter for 30-60 FPS or just unlock it. Now let's get to the juicy part. We start with resolution scaling, that provides various options. I'm not quite sure what the resolution scaling options with names like low, medium and high. There is not enough explanation as to whether high is 100% of the resolution or 2 times or 4 times the resolution. What I found interesting though is that they added some performance monitoring, and you can enable some variable resolution scaling that can raise or lower the super sampling or downsampling if in certain areas the performance are not up to snuff. And you can also choose between having a pretty much constant resolution or as close to constant as possible, or to have a constant frame rate. So if certain areas are too crowded and the performance drops, it can automatically reduce the super sampling or go straight into downsampling and keep the game running smooth. With all my tests I didn't have any problem with this, so I just left to the default high, whatever that means, and it just ran butter smooth. The texture quality is expressed in pixel as far as I can tell. There are various options, but they are not explained anywhere. And also I'm not quite sure what full means. I presume it's just the highest quality available and not just some downscaled map. Ambient occlusion, also customizable. The volume rendering quality influences settings such as depth of field. Sadly, there is no individual setting for motion blur and depth of field. So if depth of field is a problem for you, you might want to completely disable volumetric rendering. Anti-aliasing can be switched between off, FXAA and temporal anti-aliasing, which is the superior option in my opinion, at least in this case. You can also customize the level of detail bias if you need better performance, and even decide what level of details you want as a maximum. The LOD is that procedure that increases the detail of the mesh and the 3D objects the closer they are to the camera. So as you move through the world, the closest objects are very detailed and the farthest one are less detailed. We can also manually enable or disable the foliage sway, the subsurface scattering for the skin textures, the screen space reflections and the water reflections. We also have a couple options that are not quite easy to find in games. We can manually set the quality of the spherical harmonics diffusion and the dynamic range of the image that can drastically improve the color perception on monitors that support HDR. There is also another option that is not quite common, which is the depth prepass. It consumes a portion of the CPU power to pre-process depth information that will be used in the rendering with calculations for reflections and lighting. In my opinion, Monster Hunter World is quite a great port. Sure, it can be improved. For example, there is no native way to support ultra-wide HD, and there is no way to manually disable motion blur, depth of field. It also doesn't have field of view slider, although in this case is not as important, since it is a third-person game and it supports different level of camera distance. So, in a way, a higher field of view is supported, just not manually customizable. So this is it, folks. I'll leave some bits of uncommented gameplay for those who are interested. My name's been Varstahl, and I'll see you next time.
ドジゲロリ、ゲレハトス、リフトゥ、ゲレハクモポノリ。
リー、ズラファルトゥ。
シ、ソラスピラド、リテルネツイスイガー。
ニーポポイネ、別エビズリ。オクムギエレトレダ。ルトゥールリセハ、ホレリ。
ゼホ